Millionaire thought he was marrying an ugly woman in arranged marriage, but he was shocked when she— Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. A gray sky hung low over the small college town in Texas. The wind pushed cold rain along the cracked sidewalks, and students hurried beneath umbrellas. Among them walked Mark Davis, his backpack soaked, his sneakers heavy with water. He was 23 years old, a law student balancing his final semester, 2 part-time jobs, and the mountain of debt his late father had left behind. Each day felt like a test he was close to failing. Mark's phone vibrated in his pocket. He answered without thinking. Mark Davis speaking. A calm, mature female voice replied, "Mr. Davis, this is Eleanor Brooks. I would like to meet with you. It is about your financial situation." He stopped in the rain, confused. "I am sorry. Who are you?" "How do you know about that?" "I know enough," she said smoothly. "Let us meet at Brooks Bistro at 7 o'clock this evening. It is important." "Oh." The line went dead before he could reply. By the time evening arrived, the rain had not stopped. Brooks Bistro glowed warm behind its large windows, the kind of place where every glass and fork seemed to belong to another world. Mark entered hesitantly, water dripping from his jacket. In the far corner sat a woman who looked as if she had stepped out of a magazine. Silver hair, pearl earrings, and the calm posture of someone who owned everything she touched. "Mark," she greeted, her voice even, inviting him to sit. "Please, join me." He hesitated, pulling the chair out quietly. "Mrs. Brooks, I do not understand. Why am I here?" Eleanor smiled faintly, her hands folded around a porcelain teacup. "Because you are drowning in debt, the loans your father left behind, the hospital bills. I can help you." Mark's brows furrowed. "Help me how?" "By marrying me." The words fell like stones between them. He stared at her, sure he had misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me correctly," she said calmly. "This is not about love. It is a business arrangement. You will be my husband in name. In return, I will pay off your debts and secure your financial future." Mark let out a quiet, incredulous laugh. "You cannot be serious. You do not even know me." "That is exactly why it works," Eleanor replied. "You are young, unattached, and desperate enough to consider it. I need a companion, someone to stand beside me at events, someone respectable. Think of it as a contract." He looked down at his wet hands, the steam from her tea rising between them. "And what do you get from this? Control? Sympathy?" Her expression softened, though her eyes stayed sharp. "I get peace, Mr. Davis. I have no family left. I have more money than time. I want company, not romance." Mark stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the wooden floor. "This is insane. You cannot buy someone's life." Eleanor tilted her head slightly. "No, but I can offer a choice. Poverty or stability. You decide." That night, he sat at his kitchen table, rain still tapping the window. His mother's voice was weak from her illness as she asked what had happened. When he told her, she did not look shocked, only tired. "Mark," she said softly, "sometimes survival demands choices that pride cannot afford." He stared at the peeling paint on the wall, the unpaid bills stacked beside her medicine bottles. He thought of his sister's tuition, his own sinking grades, and the bank letters he had stopped opening. By the time morning came, Mark Davis had made his decision. At exactly 7 o'clock that evening, he walked back into Brooks Bistro. The same silver-haired woman waited at the same table, a faint smile on her face as if she already knew the answer. "You have decided," she said. Mark took a slow breath. "I have." Eleanor set her cup down carefully. "Good. Then let us begin the arrangements." Outside, the rain had finally stopped, but the air felt heavy, like the moment before a storm begins again. The courthouse smelled faintly of old wood and rain. 1 week later, Mark Davis stood beside Eleanor Brooks under the pale light that filtered through the tall windows. The ceremony was quiet, efficient, witnessed only by a notary and Eleanor's lawyer. There were no flowers, no music, no guests. just the sound of pens scratching across paper. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Eleanor turned with a smile that was polite but unreadable. "Welcome to your new life, Mr. Davis." Outside, the air carried a chill. Mark looked at his reflection in a puddle on the courthouse steps. His face seemed older, harder. The rain began again, thin and cold. He could not decide whether he had just saved his family or sold his soul. A black sedan waited by the curb. Eleanor's driver opened the door without a word. The ride to her estate took nearly an hour, winding through hills outside the city until the car turned into a long driveway lined with oak trees. The mansion rose ahead, vast and silent, its stone columns glowing in the headlights. Mark stepped out, his shoes sinking slightly into the wet gravel. Inside, the foyer gleamed with marble floors, gold-framed paintings, and the faint scent of lavender polish. It felt less like a home and more like a museum. "Welcome, Mr. Davis," Eleanor said, her tone formal. "You will find everything prepared. Dinner is at 7 o'clock sharp." He nodded, unsure what to say. A housekeeper appeared to guide him upstairs. The room she showed him was larger than his entire apartment. A king-size bed stood beneath a chandelier. Heavy curtains framed a balcony overlooking a manicured garden. On the desk sat a note written in elegant script. "All debts settled. Contract term, 6 months. Boundaries remain." He stared at the words for a long time. That night, during dinner, the table stretched far between them. Eleanor cut her steak with measured grace. Mark pushed food around his plate, the quiet broken only by the ticking of an antique clock. "You look uncomfortable," she said finally. "I am not used to silence," he replied. "At home, the pipes rattle and the neighbors fight through the walls. Here, it feels like the world stopped breathing." Also, Eleanor's eyes flickered with something softer than amusement. "You will adjust. Luxury has its own kind of noise." Days passed like pages in a heavy book. Mark woke early, read legal journals, and tried to ignore the emptiness of the halls. Eleanor moved through the house with precision, her footsteps light but certain. They shared meals without conversation, a pair of strangers tied by ink and signatures. One evening, Mark wandered into the library, drawn by the glow of a fireplace. He found Eleanor sitting with a glass of wine, reading a leather-bound novel. She looked up as he entered. "You should not hide in your room all the time," she said quietly. "I am not sure I belong anywhere in this house," he answered. Eleanor closed the book and regarded him carefully. "You belong where you decide to stand, Mr. Davis. That is the first rule of survival." Her words lingered long after she left the room. Later that week, Mark met the estate's gardener, an older man named Thomas, who had worked there for over 20 years. Thomas spoke freely, unlike everyone else. "She used to throw charity dinners," he said, trimming a rose bush. "After her husband died, the place went quiet. You might be the first person she has let stay here in years." Mark listened, surprised. "Why me?" Thomas shrugged. "Maybe she saw something she recognized. People with nothing left are easier to trust." No. That night, while walking back to his room, Mark paused by the grand piano in the hall. Dust covered its surface. Without thinking, he pressed one key. The soft note echoed through the silence. Upstairs, Eleanor heard it and stopped in the middle of brushing her hair. For the first time in a long while, a faint smile touched her lips. A week later, Mark woke to find an envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a handwritten invitation. "Saturday, formal attire. Do not ask questions." He frowned, but obeyed. On Saturday evening, he followed the chauffeur to a glittering ballroom downtown. Cameras flashed, journalists murmured, and every guest turned to stare as Eleanor Brooks arrived on his arm. Mark realized then that the contract marriage was not simply about companionship. It was about reputation, power, and secrets. And though he stood beside her, wearing a tailored suit that was not his, he felt smaller than ever beneath the chandelier's light. Still, when Eleanor introduced him to the crowd as her husband, she leaned close and whispered, "Smile, Mr. Davis. Tonight, you play your part." He did. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered back, "How long before the part becomes real?" The ballroom shimmered with golden light, chandeliers casting hundreds of reflections on the polished marble floor. Mark Davis stood at the edge of it all, his hand loosely resting on Eleanor's arm. Laughter echoed around them, glasses clinked, and cameras flashed. It was a charity gala, the kind of world he had only seen on television. Every face looked perfect, every smile rehearsed. Eleanor glided through the room with practiced poise, greeting investors and socialites with ease. Mark followed quietly, unsure of what to say, conscious of every stare that landed on him. He heard whispers as they passed. "Who is he? He looks too young. A charity case, maybe?" Eleanor ignored them all, but Mark felt each word like a small cut. When they reached the main table, the host of the gala, a man with a sharp grin, gestured toward them. "Mrs. Brooks," he said loudly, "and your new husband. Quite the surprise. You move fast." Eleanor smiled coolly. "Life is short, Mr. Carter. We must make our decisions before it decides for us." A few people laughed politely. Mark forced a smile, but his jaw tightened. As the night went on, he found himself standing alone near the buffet, his glass of sparkling water untouched. He watched Eleanor across the room, dazzling in her silver gown, her laughter timed perfectly. She belonged there. He did not. Then, without warning, a woman approached him. Her perfume was sharp. Her dress glittered like ice. "You must be the husband," she said. "I am Victoria Lane, Eleanor's business partner." She leaned closer. "Do you even know what you have married into?" Mark frowned. "Excuse me?" She smiled thinly. "Eleanor is brilliant but ruthless. You will learn that. Every man before you has." Before he could reply, Eleanor appeared beside him. "Victoria," she said smoothly, "I see you have met my husband." Victoria gave a slight nod. "I was congratulating him." "I am sure you were," Eleanor replied. Her tone was polite, but her eyes held steel. The rest of the night passed in a blur. When they returned home, Eleanor removed her jewelry in silence. Mark stood by the window, staring at the rain that had begun again. "You handled yourself well," she said quietly. "Did I?" he asked. "Because it felt like everyone there was waiting for me to trip." "That is how this world works," she said. "They smile while counting your cracks." Mark turned to face her. "Then why bring me there?" "Because," she said, meeting his eyes, "I wanted them to see that I am not alone." Her honesty caught him off guard. He did not reply. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she walked away, leaving the faint scent of lavender behind her. Days turned into weeks. Mark learned the routines of the mansion, the schedule of the staff, the quiet hours when the house seemed to breathe. He began spending time in the library, reading old case files from his law classes. Sometimes Eleanor would join him, sitting across the table, working on her laptop. They rarely spoke, but the silence between them grew softer, less hostile. One evening, Mark found her standing in the garden at dusk, watching the fountain lights shimmer in the dark. He hesitated before stepping closer. "You spend a lot of time out here." "It is the only place that feels real," she said. "Everything inside that house is performance." He nodded. "Maybe we are both performing." Eleanor looked at him, something flickering behind her calm eyes. "Maybe," she whispered. The next morning, a newspaper headline sat on the breakfast table. "Eleanor Brooks's new husband raises questions." The article speculated about their marriage, calling it strategic and transactional. Mark felt his stomach tighten. "They are tearing you apart because of me," he said. Eleanor folded the paper neatly. "They were tearing me apart long before you came. Do not take it personally." That evening, she called him to her office. The room was lined with dark wood, and a single lamp glowed over her desk. A folder lay open. "These are the remaining debts of your family," she said. "All cleared, as promised." Mark stared at the documents. Relief washed over him, but it carried confusion with it. "Why do this?" "Because I keep my word," Eleanor replied simply. "And because I do not like seeing potential wasted." He looked at her for a long moment. "You make it sound like this marriage is a mentorship." Maybe it is," she said. "Or maybe it is something neither of us understands yet." Outside, thunder rolled across the night sky. For the first time, Mark saw her not as a wealthy stranger, but as a woman carrying invisible weight. And when she glanced at him, the silence between them no longer felt cold. It felt like the beginning of something dangerous and real. The following weeks unfolded with a quiet rhythm. Mark Davis began to see pieces of Eleanor Brooks that no one else noticed. She was meticulous, guarded, yet deeply human beneath the surface of her wealth and control. He would catch her pausing at the piano in the hallway, fingertips brushing the keys but never pressing down. One evening, after dinner, he found her there again. "Do you play?" he asked softly. "Not anymore," she replied. "The sound reminds me of things I would rather forget." Mark hesitated, then sat beside her. "My mother used to say that music is a kind of confession. You cannot hide while you play." Eleanor looked at him, her expression unreadable, then said, "And what would you confess, Mr. Davis?" "That I do not know who I am in this house," he said honestly. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she reached out and pressed one key. The note echoed through the empty hall. "Then start here," she whispered. From that night, something shifted. They began to share small parts of their lives, moments that were never written in the contract. Mark started helping her review legal documents for her foundation. She started asking about his family, his studies, his dreams before life collapsed. Their conversations were still cautious, but the distance between them was slowly shrinking. One morning, Mark woke to find Eleanor waiting in the dining room, dressed elegantly as always. "We have an event today," she said. "The Carter Foundation conference." He frowned. "Another crowd of perfect strangers?" Her lips curved slightly. "Consider it practice. You did well last time." At the conference, Mark surprised her. When reporters swarmed, asking about their marriage, he spoke clearly and calmly. "Mrs. Brooks has dedicated her life to supporting education and equality. I am proud to stand beside her." The words were simple, but genuine. For the first time, Eleanor smiled without calculation. Later that night, as they returned home, she said quietly, "You handled that better than I expected." He grinned. "Maybe I am learning the language of your world." "And maybe," she replied, "you are teaching me mine again." The mansion felt warmer that evening. In the library, the fire crackled as rain fell outside. Eleanor poured 2 glasses of wine. "To partnerships," she said. Mark raised his glass. "Even the strange ones." Their laughter filled the space between them. Neither noticed how natural it sounded. But as the clock struck midnight, Eleanor's phone buzzed with a message that made her expression darken. She read it once, twice, then quietly placed the phone face down on the table. "What is wrong?" Mark asked. "Nothing," she said quickly, standing. "Just business." Yet as she walked away, her voice trembled slightly, and Mark realized that whatever she was hiding had nothing to do with business at all. The next morning, the mansion was unusually quiet. Eleanor Brooks had left early, leaving only a note on the breakfast table. "Business meeting. Do not wait up." Her handwriting was neat, steady, yet the pressure of the pen had torn faint marks into the paper. Mark Davis tried to focus on his studies, but her unease from the previous night lingered in his thoughts. By noon, he gave up pretending to read and wandered into the garden. Thomas, the gardener, was trimming the hedges. "She has been driving herself too hard again," Thomas said without being asked. "Meetings, lawyers, board members." "Something is stirring." Mark frowned. "Do you know what it is?" Thomas shook his head. "If she wanted anyone to know, we would already know." That evening, when Eleanor returned, her calm mask was gone. Her usually perfect posture was tense, and her voice, when she spoke, was quiet but clipped. "There will be another gala this weekend," she said. "It is mandatory that you attend." "What kind of gala?" Mark asked. "The annual shareholders' dinner," she said, pouring herself a drink. "There are rumors about me about us. I need to make it clear that everything is under control." He studied her face. "Eleanor, are you in trouble?" She looked up sharply. "Everyone in this world is always in trouble. The only difference is how well you hide it." On Saturday evening, the ballroom was even larger than the last. Reporters filled the space, cameras flashing. Eleanor entered first, radiant in an emerald gown, every inch the woman of power. Mark followed, his tie perfectly straight, but his heart unsteady. Halfway through the dinner, a voice rang out from across the room. "So this is the man who sold his soul for comfort." The words came from Victoria Lane, Eleanor's business partner. The crowd fell silent. Eleanor's grip tightened around her glass. "Victoria," she said coldly, "this is neither the time nor the place." Victoria smiled, her tone venomous. "Maybe it is. People should know that your husband was broke, that you bought him like a handbag. How much did you pay, Eleanor? Mark felt heat rise in his face, but Eleanor raised a hand, stopping him. Her voice, calm yet powerful, cut through the tension. You are right, Victoria, she said. I did pay for loyalty. What a shame. Money cannot buy dignity. A few people gasped. Cameras clicked wildly. Victoria's smirk vanished. Later, in the car, silence settled between them. Mark finally spoke. You did not have to defend me like that. Eleanor stared out the window. I did not do it for you. I did it because no one humiliates my husband in public. Contract or not. The car pulled into the driveway, rain beginning to fall again. She stepped out first, her reflection caught in the wet stone. Mark watched her walk toward the door and realized, with a quiet shock, that the part of him meant to remain distant was beginning to care. Rain drummed softly against the tall windows of the mansion that night. The gala had ended hours ago, yet neither Eleanor Brooks nor Mark Davis could sleep. The confrontation with Victoria Lane had left the air heavy and sharp. Mark sat by the fire in the library, staring at the flames as if they could explain the woman he had just defended in his own heart. He heard the soft click of heels behind him. Eleanor entered, no longer in her emerald gown but in a simple robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked smaller, younger somehow, without the armor of wealth. You should be resting, he said quietly. So should you, she replied, her voice tired. But I suppose we both have too much on our minds. She poured 2 glasses of wine and handed him one. The firelight flickered between them. What Victoria said, he began, was cruel. But the way you answered her, no one in that room dared breathe afterward. Eleanor gave a faint smile. Power is not about shouting, Mark. It is about making silence work for you. He studied her for a long moment. Is that how you survived all these years? Turning silence into armor? Sometimes, she said softly. Sometimes, it is all I had. The words hung between them like smoke. After a while, Eleanor set her glass down and walked toward the piano. She brushed a thin layer of dust from the keys and pressed one. The sound was soft, hesitant. Then another note, and another. A melody began to take shape, fragile but real. Mark stood beside her. You said you do not play anymore. I lied, she whispered. I stopped when my husband died, but tonight, I needed to remember that I am still alive. Oh? Her hands trembled slightly as she played. Mark placed his hand gently over hers to steady it. She did not pull away. The music continued, quiet and imperfect, filling the room with something warmer than fire. When the last note faded, she looked up at him. Tell me the truth, she said. Do you regret marrying me? He shook his head slowly. I do not regret helping my family, but lately, I have stopped thinking of this as help. It feels different. Oh, her breath caught, but she said nothing. Outside, lightning flashed across the sky. The next morning, the news broke. Victoria Lane under investigation for fraud. The headline covered every business page. Eleanor sat in her office, scanning the articles, her jaw set. Mark entered quietly. So this is why she came after you? Eleanor nodded. She was stealing from the company. She thought discrediting me would hide her tracks. Are you going to press charges? He asked. I do not have to, she said. The board already has. He leaned against the doorway. Then it is over. For her, maybe, Eleanor said. But not for us. There will be fallout. There always is. Later that evening, they shared dinner in the quiet dining hall. No reporters, no guests, just the clink of silverware and the steady rhythm of rain. You once said everyone in your world is in trouble, Mark said softly. Do you still believe that? Eleanor looked at him for a long time. Yes, but for the first time, I do not feel alone in it. Their eyes met, steady and unguarded. For a brief moment, the contract between them ceased to exist. There were no debts, no arrangements, no obligations, only 2 people who had stopped pretending. And when she smiled, it was small and real, the kind of smile that could make a mansion feel like home. For the first time since their wedding, the mansion felt peaceful. The morning sun broke through the clouds, scattering light across the marble floors. Mark Davis made coffee in the kitchen, the simple act, grounding him in a life that no longer felt borrowed. When Eleanor Brooks entered, barefoot and still in her silk robe, she paused, surprised. "You are making breakfast?" He smiled. "I thought I would return the favor for all the meals I have eaten in silence." Her expression softened. "Then I suppose I should sit and let you work." Oh, for a brief hour, they lived like ordinary people. They talked about trivial things, books, music, the ridiculous size of the dining table. When he placed a plate before her, she whispered, "You are the first person to cook in this kitchen in years." The fragile calm did not last. That afternoon, Eleanor's assistant arrived with a thick envelope and a pale face. "You need to see this," she said. Inside were printed photographs, grainy, candid images taken through windows and across streets. Mark and Eleanor at the gala, at home, in the garden. One photo showed them at the piano, his hand over hers. Across the last picture, someone had scrawled a message in red ink. "Truth always comes out." Eleanor's face went white. "Who sent these?" The assistant hesitated. There was no name, only a note saying a reporter plans to publish a story next week about the contract marriage. Mark's jaw tightened. Victoria must have planted this before she was exposed. Eleanor nodded slowly. "And someone else picked up the trail. The board will see this. Investors will panic." For the first time, fear cracked through her composure. She sank into a chair, pressing a hand to her forehead. "Everything I built could collapse overnight." Mark stepped closer. "Then let me help." "You already have," she said quietly. "This is my mess to clean." But he refused to leave her side. Together, they reviewed documents, statements, emails, searching for whoever was leaking information. Hours turned into night. The only light came from the lamp over her desk. Finally, Mark found a pattern. "Here," he said, pointing at a financial report. "These transfers from the media fund. They lead to one of your executives, James Holloway." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "He was Victoria's ally. I should have seen it." The next morning, she confronted Holloway at the company headquarters. Mark waited in the car, watching through the glass doors as voices rose inside. Minutes later, security escorted the man out. Eleanor walked back to the car, composed but silent. When she sat beside him, she exhaled slowly. "It is done." He admitted everything. He sold the story for money. Mark nodded. "Then it is over." "No," she said softly. "Now the press will want my response. They will dig deeper. They always do." That night, she stood on the balcony, the wind tugging at her hair. Mark joined her quietly. "You fought hard today," he said. "So did you," she replied. "But victory feels hollow when you have to keep proving you deserve it." He turned toward her. "You deserve it. You deserve peace." Her voice trembled. "Peace is not something people like me get. It is something we buy with silence." He reached for her hand. "Then stop buying it. You do not owe the world an explanation." For a long moment, she looked at their joined hands. Then she whispered, "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is," he said softly. The night stretched around them, quiet and fragile. In that silence, the truth between them was no longer hidden. It was standing right there, unspoken, undeniable, and dangerously real. The following week brought a storm neither of them could escape. The story broke on every business network and social media feed. The contract marriage of Eleanor Brooks. Love or transaction? Headlines spread like wildfire, dissecting every photograph, every rumor, every glance caught by a camera lens. Eleanor Brooks did not leave the mansion for 2 days. Reporters swarmed the front gates, shouting questions through the iron bars. Mark Davis watched from an upstairs window, helpless as the world tore her reputation apart. On the third day, she came downstairs dressed in a black suit, her expression calm but pale. "I am holding a press conference," she said. Mark set his coffee down. "You do not have to face them." "Yes, I do," she replied. "If I stay silent, they decide the story for me. I am done hiding behind contracts." By noon, the ballroom had been turned into a stage for cameras. Dozens of microphones lined the podium. Mark stood in the crowd, his heart pounding. Eleanor stepped up to the microphone. The flashes nearly blinded her, but her voice was steady. "For years," she began, "I believed control could protect me, that wealth, contracts, and distance could keep my life from falling apart. But I was wrong. The truth is simpler. I married a man who reminded me what honesty feels like." The room fell silent. she continued. Mark Davis did not marry me for money. He married me because I asked him to. I made him an offer that would have insulted a better person. Instead, he gave me dignity in return. He stood beside me when no one else did. That is the truth. Her voice trembled slightly, but she did not look away from the cameras. If that costs me my company, then so be it. I am done living like a ghost. The room erupted in questions. Reporters shouted her name, demanding details, proof, explanations. But Eleanor simply stepped back from the podium, leaving the microphones buzzing with noise. Mark met her at the side door, his eyes wide. You just risked everything. She smiled faintly. No, I reclaimed it. Within hours, the story changed. Public sympathy poured in. Viewers praised her courage, calling her confession raw and human. Investors who had once doubted her began to call back. For the first time, Eleanor did not care about the numbers. That evening, she and Mark returned to the mansion. The house was quiet again, free of reporters, filled instead with the soft glow of relief. They stood in the foyer, unsure what to say. You did not have to defend me like that, Mark said. Eleanor turned to him. It was not a defense. It was a confession. He took a step closer. Then, here is mine. I stopped pretending this was only a deal a long time ago. Her breath caught. You cannot mean that. I do, he said, his voice steady. I thought I was saving my family, but somehow I ended up saving myself with you. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the antique clock. Then Eleanor reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek. You should not say things you do not mean. I have never meant anything more, he whispered. She closed her eyes, as if trying to remember how to breathe. Then what are we now? He smiled softly. Maybe something real. No. Outside, thunder rolled again, but this time it sounded less like a threat and more like applause from the sky. The storm had passed, and what remained between them was fragile, flawed, but entirely true. The morning after the storm felt different. The mansion that once echoed with silence was filled with sunlight. The scent of fresh coffee drifted through the halls, and for the first time in months, the world outside did not feel like an enemy. Eleanor Brooks stood by the window, barefoot, holding a mug in both hands. She looked out at the garden, where the last traces of rain sparkled like glass on the roses. Mark Davis entered quietly, his sleeves rolled up, a faint smile on his face. It feels strange, he said. No reporters, no phone calls, no noise. Eleanor turned, her expression softer than he had ever seen. Peace feels strange when you have not known it for years. He stepped closer. Then maybe we should learn it together. They shared breakfast in the sunroom, where everything was bright and simple. The newspaper on the table carried a new headline. Eleanor Brooks wins back investors after honest confession. But Eleanor did not read it. She had spent too many years living inside headlines. Today, she wanted to live inside moments. Later that afternoon, she took Mark to the foundation headquarters downtown. Reporters nodded politely but kept their distance this time. Inside the office, her employees greeted her with cautious admiration. She addressed them briefly, her tone calm and grounded. We are not rebuilding an image, she said. We are rebuilding trust. That starts here, with all of you. After the meeting, she and Mark walked through the city park nearby. Children ran past with kites, and an old man played the violin by the fountain. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Eleanor said quietly, Do you remember the first night we met? You looked like you were running from the rain. Mark laughed softly. I was. And somehow, I ran straight into a hurricane named Eleanor Brooks. She smiled, shaking her head. You make me sound terrifying. You were, he said. But not anymore. She stopped walking and looked at him. Then what am I now? He met her gaze. You are home. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she reached into her bag and handed him a small envelope. Open it. Inside was the original marriage contract, neatly folded, with her signature still visible. Across the last page, she had written in elegant handwriting, Null and void by mutual consent. Mark looked up. You are ending the contract? Yes, she said gently. It started as a deal, but that is not what we are anymore. You are free, Mark. He held the paper for a moment, then tore it carefully in half. Freedom does not mean walking away, he said. It means choosing where you want to stay. Eleanor's eyes filled with quiet emotion. And where do you want to stay? He smiled. Right here. Weeks passed. The foundation launched a new program, scholarships for students from struggling families. Eleanor named it the Davis Initiative, though Mark protested. You did the work, he said. She replied, No, you reminded me why the work matters. Oh, on the day the program opened, a small ceremony was held in the mansion garden. Former employees, friends, and community members attended. Eleanor wore a simple white dress, her silver hair shining in the afternoon light. Mark stood beside her, speaking to the crowd. When we started this, he said, it was about redemption, but it became about truth, the kind that survives, scandal, fear, and pride. Sometimes love begins as a mistake, but if you stay long enough, it becomes the lesson you were meant to learn. Applause rose from the crowd, warm and sincere. Eleanor looked at him, pride and tenderness blending in her gaze. When the applause faded, she whispered, You have a way with words, Mr. Davis. And you, he said softly, have a way of making them mean something. As the guests drifted away, they remained in the garden. The sun dipped low, painting everything gold. Eleanor took his hand. Do you ever think about how it began? Every day, he said, and I would not change a single thing. She smiled. Not even the contract? Especially not the contract, he said. It was the only deal I ever made that gave me something real. The breeze carried the scent of roses through the air. Somewhere nearby, the gardener laughed with the staff, and the mansion's windows reflected the soft glow of evening. Eleanor leaned her head against his shoulder, and for the first time since they met, she felt no walls, no secrets, no distance. Only the quiet certainty that they had both finally found what they had been running from. The screen fades to black, the final line appearing in white letters. True love is never about ownership. It is about the courage to choose again together.